Everyone preps food and everyone stores water, but almost nobody thinks about drinks. And that is the exact blind spot that quietly breaks most survival plans apart. You look at your basement shelves lined with cases of bottled water and think your family is secure for a month. But here is the dangerous medical reality that most people never realize until it is too late. Plain water does not rehydrate a stressed body. Water hydrates, but electrolytes are what actually allow your body to absorb that fluid and put it to use. If the grid goes down or a prolonged supply chain crisis hits, you will be facing physical exertion, high anxiety, and sudden shifts in your daily routine. Under those harsh conditions, your small intestine requires sodium and glucose to be present at the exact same time, just to transport water into your bloodstream. Without them, you can drink gallons of that carefully purified, stored water and still suffer from dangerous, rapid dehydration because the liquid largely just passes right through you. But the vulnerability of a water-only pantry goes far beyond basic hydration. What happens when your family's bodies stop producing hunger signals because cortisol levels are maxed out from sustained stress? What happens to your immune system when essential nutrients like vitamin C begin breaking down within weeks of losing access to fresh grocery store produce? What happens to your household's morale when your children have to drink nothing but flat, room temperature water with every single meal, every single hour, every single day? For weeks on end. Plain water covers none of these physiological and psychological needs, and when the normal world stops functioning, none of those needs are optional. This is the fatal flaw in the modern American preparedness strategy. The vast majority of people pour their entire budget into rice beans and canned goods, but they completely ignore the liquid categories that actually sustain human life and cognitive function during an extended crisis. Today, we are going to permanently fix that vulnerability. We are going to walk through 10 specific highly functional survival drinks that you need to stockpile right now. Most of these items will last for years, and several of them literally never expire. They will protect your family's physical health, stabilize their mental well-being, and even serve as the ultimate high-value barter currency when cash loses its meaning. You are likely feeling the financial squeeze every single time you walk into a grocery store, and you are not imagining it. The food supply chain in the United States is currently navigating a period of severe structural instability. Caught between compounding inflation, extreme weather shifts, and increasing infrastructural vulnerabilities. If we look closely at the macroeconomic data, the overall consumer price index might seem like it has cooled from its historical peaks. But the reality for food consumed at home tells a much more concerning story. Prices for everyday groceries have maintained a cumulative upward trend, hitting an increase of 2.3% in the year 2025. And the forecast points to an additional 2.7% rise through 2026. This relentless financial pressure is forcing a fundamental shift in how middle and lower income families manage their household budgets, prompting a necessary transition from short-term consumption to a strategy of self-insurance through the long-term stockpiling of essential goods. The situation becomes even more alarming when we look at specific dietary staples that American families rely on. Animal protein, specifically beef, has seen massive price spikes of up to 16%. This dramatic surge is directly tied to the national cattle herd shrinking to just 86 million head, which is the absolute lowest level recorded since 1951. Furthermore, the cost of sugar and fundamental sweeteners is projected to jump by an additional 7.2% in 2026. Signaling deep unresolved fractures in the global agricultural supply chain. As these everyday items become prohibitively expensive food, insecurity has crept up across the nation, expanding from 12.5% to 13.3% of all households. Among those relying on supplemental nutritional assistance, the food insecurity rate has skyrocketed to an unprecedented 46%. Proving that family emergency funds are being completely drained just to keep basic meals on the dinner table. This fragile economic environment is exactly why stockpiling the right survival drinks is no longer just about personal hydration, but about deep localized financial preservation. When you strategically convert a portion of your shrinking cash reserves into infinitely shelf-stable, Functional beverages, you are creating a private inflation-proof asset class right inside your own home. In the event of an extended grid failure, a severe regional natural disaster, or a broader collapse of the digital banking system, the fiat currency sitting in your checking account immediately loses its practical utility. You cannot eat it, you cannot drink it, and in a prolonged blackout, you cannot even digitally access it. Under those extreme conditions, high-value consumable goods naturally and rapidly evolve into a localized commodity currency. These carefully chosen items possess supreme liquidity and unmatched trade value simply because they serve fundamental, non-negotiable human needs when traditional systems fail. Think carefully about the practical mechanics of a post-grid trading economy. A 50-pound bag of raw wheat or a massive bucket of dried beans is incredibly difficult to divide safely and trade for small daily necessities without broadcasting to your neighbors exactly how much food you have stored away. However, the survival drinks we are focusing on offer complete flexibility. Items like freeze-dried instant coffee possess a peak exchange value in supply chain disruption scenarios. People who are dependent on caffeine and suddenly cut off from their morning routine will happily trade highly valuable tools, information, or services just to alleviate their withdrawal symptoms and regain a fleeting sense of normalcy. Similarly, raw honey holds one of the highest possible exchange values in a post-collapse economy due to the extreme scarcity of natural sweeteners and its miraculous infinite shelf life. Dried tea leaves and herbal teas serve as highly flexible negotiation items for smaller, localized trades because they are lightweight, easily concealed, and universally recognized for their physical comfort and medicinal properties. In historical financial crises all over the world, items like high-proof distilled alcohol have constantly emerged as the most universal intermediary currency. This happens because high-proof liquor is easily divided into smaller quantities and fulfills a massive community demand, acting not just as a psychological morale booster but as a critical medical resource and solvent. Even something as inexpensive and common as distilled white vinegar becomes highly valuable in a crisis, serving as a crucial food preservative for pickling and an emergency surface sterilizer. When you purchase these specific liquid assets right now, you are actively shielding your family from the documented upcoming inflation on sweeteners and the general instability of the global market. You are locking in today's prices on goods that will never degrade, never spoil, and never lose their inherent biological or trade value. By recognizing the true economic power of these functional drinks, you are elevating your household from merely surviving a crisis to navigating it with absolute financial leverage and unshakable confidence. Let us begin with the foundation of your emergency liquid assets, which we will call the caloric anchors. When a crisis hits and you are suddenly forced to manually manage your household, or simply endure the physical stress of a prolonged winter blackout, your body burns through its energy reserves at an alarming rate. You need immediate calories, but you do not want to force your stressed digestive system to work overtime processing heavy, dry grains. This is where the first and most critical item on our list comes into play, which is pure raw honey. Raw honey is arguably the most perfect survival drink base in existence because it possesses an infinite shelf life when stored properly in a sealed glass jar, kept away from direct sunlight. The biochemistry behind this is fascinating and incredibly practical for our stockpiling purposes. Honey has a naturally low water activity level hovering strictly between 0.53 and 0.60, combined with a natural sugar concentration of over 80%. This creates a state of extreme osmotic pressure, which means the honey literally sucks the water out of any bacteria or microorganisms, destroying them completely on contact. Furthermore, raw honey is naturally acidic with a pH ranging from 3.2 to 4.5, and it contains a unique enzyme called glucose oxidase. This specific enzyme continuously releases tiny amounts of hydrogen peroxide, providing a brilliant, natural antibacterial defense. When you dissolve just 1 tablespoon of raw honey into a cup of warm water, you immediately deliver 64 calories of pure, rapidly absorbing energy to a tired body without taxing the digestive system whatsoever. In a true medical emergency where commercial first aid supplies are exhausted, That same honey can even be applied directly to open wounds as a highly effective natural antiseptic. Following right behind raw honey, your pantry must include pure maple syrup and concentrated molasses. As long as these heavy syrups are kept sealed in a cool, dry place or safely frozen, their shelf life is effectively indefinite. The immense concentration of natural sugars in these products completely eliminates any free water, which creates a hostile environment where mold spores and dangerous bacteria simply cannot survive. But the real pragmatic value of maple syrup and molasses lies in what happens when you mix them into your daily drinking water. In an extended disaster scenario, especially one involving intense manual labor without the conveniences of modern electricity, your body rapidly depletes its mineral reserves. A glass of water enriched with pure maple syrup or molasses does not just provide a massive influx of necessary calories. It also delivers vital essential minerals like calcium, potassium, iron, and magnesium. This makes it a crucial micronutrient supplement for anyone doing heavy physical work during a grid-down event, and it holds tremendous barter value, especially for trading with families desperately trying to feed and comfort young children when the supermarkets are empty. Now we must purposefully shift our focus from sweet to savory, because living on sweet drinks alone will quickly cause flavor fatigue and appetite suppression. This brings us to the third critical item to secure, which is highly concentrated bouillon cubes and freeze-dried bone broth. You might not immediately think of broth as a primary beverage, but in a survival context, it is an absolute lifesaver. These concentrated soup bases utilize an incredibly high concentration of sodium chloride to completely lock away internal moisture, creating a microscopic environment that stops all bacterial growth in its tracks. A quality bouillon cube kept in its original foil and placed in a sealed container can sit safely for a decade or more without losing its potency. When you drop one of those savory cubes into a mug of hot water, you are creating a deeply satisfying drink that serves a vital medical purpose. Your body desperately needs that rush of sodium to maintain stable blood pressure, particularly when you are sweating through physical exertion or recovering from a mild illness. Furthermore, the rich, familiar taste of chicken or beef broth acts as a powerful psychological morale booster. When your family has been forced to eat nothing but bland, dry-stored foods like white rice and plain beans for days on end, a hot mug of savory broth completely revitalizes the palate and greatly improves overall appetite. By quietly securing these three caloric anchors, raw honey, pure maple syrup, and concentrated bouillon, you are guaranteeing that your household will always have access to safe, instant energy and essential minerals no matter what happens to the fragile retail supply chains outside your front door. While calories and essential minerals keep the physical machine running, we must aggressively address the silent, hidden threats that emerge within the first few days of any major disruption, which are the sudden collapse of appetite, the loss of morale, and the rapid degradation of your sleep cycle. There is a highly specific physiological failure that shows up reliably in extended emergencies that most people would never predict, and that is severe appetite suppression. Sustained psychological stress heavily raises your cortisol levels, and cortisol reliably kills all natural hunger signals. You could have a pantry absolutely packed with rice, beans, and canned goods, but your body simply stops asking for food, which quietly compounds every other physical and cognitive problem you are trying to manage. This brings us to a highly specific item almost nobody stocks, which is powdered lemon juice. A glass of water mixed with powdered lemon juice before a meal is a scientifically documented appetite stimulant. The tartness and citric acid trigger immediate saliva production, increase your stomach acid secretion, and tell your brain that food is incoming, returning your hunger within minutes. Quality powdered lemon contains actual lemon solids, which means it provides real vitamin C, natural antimicrobial properties, and vital digestive support. Adding this powder to stored water transforms it from something consumed out of pure necessity into something that feels like a comforting choice, giving your family a small but vital sense of agency. While fresh lemons rot in just a few weeks, powdered lemon juice sealed in an airtight container maintains full medicinal potency for 2 to 4 years. Speaking of vitamin C, the next critical category involves baseline immune protection. And military history gives us a perfect, highly effective blueprint. During the early years of the Second World War, supply lines were cut, and fresh citrus completely disappeared across Britain. The government quickly realized that without a consistent vitamin C source, the civilian population would face a catastrophic public health crisis within weeks, leading to deep fatigue, slow wound healing, and struggling immune systems. Their immediate solution was rosehip tea. Dried rosehips carry substantially more natural vitamin C gram for gram than fresh citrus, and when sealed airtight, these simple tea bags hold meaningful potency for 2 to 3 years at minimum. A single cup provides vital anti-inflammatory polyphenols and a warm, soothing drink from a single, inexpensive tea bag. Scurvy and immune collapse were the primary causes of death on long historical campaigns and ocean voyages, not the environment itself, so securing dried rosehip tea is a massive, inexpensive shield for your family's long-term health. Now we must address the psychological anchors of your pantry, starting with high-quality freeze-dried instant coffee. In a grid-down scenario, caffeine dependency is a very real physiological hurdle. But coffee provides something much deeper than just an energy spike. The familiar smell and ritual of a hot cup of coffee in the middle of a dark, cold house without power has an immediate calming effect, stopping panic and re-establishing a desperately needed sense of normalcy. Because the freeze-drying process removes all moisture and dangerous oils, instant coffee packed in sealed containers with oxygen absorbers can easily last 25 years to a lifetime without ever going rancid. Its value as a barter item is also practically unmatched, standing at the absolute peak in supply chain disruption scenarios. But you must also pair this with chicory root coffee, used heavily by soldiers during the American Civil War when supply lines failed. Roasted chicory provides a warm, bitter, familiar drink with zero caffeine. More importantly, chicory root is incredibly dense in inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria, offering targeted daily digestive support precisely when your family's diet has shifted to heavy, shelf-stable foods. Finally, we reach the most vulnerable physiological process of all, which is your sleep cycle. Sleep is always the very first casualty of almost every disruption scenario. Unfamiliar sounds in the neighborhood, drastically changed routines, and unresolved anxiety keep your nervous system locked in a state of perceived threat, completely preventing you from entering the deep sleep stages where your body actually recovers. Within just 48 hours of poor sleep, your decision-making severely degrades, emotional regulation crumbles, and interpersonal friction skyrockets. Your definitive countermeasure here is pure chamomile tea. Chamomile contains a specific flavonoid called apigenin, which naturally binds to the exact same receptors in your brain as pharmaceutical sedatives, but in a completely safe, mild, and non-habit-forming way. It is clinically proven to reduce anxiety scores and drastically improve sleep onset. Stored properly away from light and moisture, the apigenin in chamomile remains biologically active for years, making it the absolute simplest, most effective intervention for the exact problem that quietly undermines everything else in a household emergency. Most people treat water and hydration as the exact same thing, but they are not, and this critical distinction is purely physiological. Water hydrates your system, but electrolytes are what actually rehydrate you. The World Health Organization built its entire oral rehydration therapy protocol around this single biological mechanism, utilizing a precise combination of sodium, potassium, glucose, and water. That specific protocol is credited with saving millions of lives in disaster and disease environments across 5 decades, not because the minerals simply replace the fluid, but because they unlock the body's own cellular absorption process. Powdered electrolyte mix is indefinitely stable when kept dry, as the vital minerals simply do not degrade and the glucose does not spoil. Airtight storage is the only real requirement to keep this life-saving medical intervention fully functional for decades. Alongside standard chemical mixes, you absolutely must stockpile coconut water powder. Coconut water has a well-earned reputation as one of the most complete natural electrolyte sources available to humanity, delivering crucial ratios of potassium, magnesium, sodium, and calcium. While canned coconut water is incredibly heavy, takes up significant physical space, and has a very defined expiration date, coconut water powder solves all of those logistical problems immediately. It is freeze-dried coconut water reduced to a completely stable dry form. And when sealed in an airtight barrier, it stores perfectly for 2 to 5 years at a mere fraction of the original weight. Moving beyond pure hydration, we must secure a reliable source of complete protein to protect your family when the commercial meat supply chain inevitably fractures. Non-fat dry milk powder, when vacuum sealed and stored properly alongside oxygen absorbers, can effortlessly maintain its dense nutritional value for up to 25 years. This extreme longevity is possible because the manufacturing process completely removes the milk fats and lipids, which are the primary biological components that cause standard whole milk powder to go violently rancid. It provides a complete protein source and abundant calcium, acting as a crucial dietary replacement when retail protein sources disappear from the grocery shelves. To leverage this even further, consider the historical military application of powdered milk tea. Quality black tea combined with whole milk powder and a modest amount of sweetener creates one of the most complete single-serving survival drinks that exists in a shelf-stable form. Consuming caffeine alongside milk fats and proteins actively slows gastric emptying, allowing the caffeine to absorb gradually over a longer window, rather than hitting your nervous system in one massive, anxiety-inducing spike. The combined result provides 2 to 3 hours of stable, sustained cognitive function without a hard crash or a sudden blood sugar drop. As we build out this liquid arsenal, we must also secure our primary sterilizers, beginning with distilled white vinegar. White vinegar with a 5% acetic acid concentration is the absolute lowest cost survival liquid available that delivers the highest functional yield. Its remarkably strong acidic environment, with a pH sitting around 2.4, completely destroys dangerous disease-causing bacteria on contact. Beyond vital surface sterilization, diluted vinegar heavily supports human digestion when your emergency diet lacks fresh dietary fiber, and it acts as a critical chemical preservative for pickling fresh garden foods. In addition to external sterilizers, you must proactively plan for internal gastrointestinal illness, which is a consistent and predictable risk during any disruption involving uncertain water sources or immense psychological stress. This is exactly why you should safely store cases of canned sparkling water. Carbonation actively suppresses human nausea. Carbonic acid, which is the exact compound responsible for the physical bubbles, has a clinically documented effect on nausea reduction that is completely separate from any added flavoring. While not indefinitely stable, sealed aluminum cans maintain meaningful carbonation for roughly 2 to 3 years, providing a critical first response medical tool for nausea that requires zero medication and carries zero harmful side effects. Finally, we reach the ultimate multi-purpose liquid asset, which is high-proof distilled liquor like vodka, whiskey, or rum, sitting above 40% alcohol by volume. When you purchase these specific spirits unflavored without any added sugars or dairy, they possess an absolutely limitless shelf life. That massive concentration of ethanol turns the liquid into an utterly sterile environment, automatically coagulating the proteins of any microscopic invaders. In a true medical emergency, it serves as a rapid caloric energy source, a localized pain management tool, a powerful psychological stress reliever, and a vital chemical solvent for extracting natural medicines from wild herbs. Because of its immense physiological demand and easy division into small bottles, high-proof alcohol holds absolute perfect trade liquidity in any post-collapse bartering system. Now that we have established exactly which 10 functional liquids and powders to secure, we have to talk about the physical reality of keeping them safe in your home. Having the right items means absolutely nothing if you do not understand the specific chemical and physical laws required to keep them viable for the next 2 decades. The concept of a forever shelf life is not magic. It is entirely based on 4 rigorous biological principles that strictly prevent microorganisms from growing and aggressively slow down natural chemical degradation. The first and most important principle is the control of water activity. Microorganisms and harmful bacteria require free water to reproduce and survive. When the available water index drops below 0.60, absolutely all biological activity from bacteria, yeast, and mold completely stops. This is closely tied to the second scientific principle, which is osmotic pressure. When you have a solution with an incredibly high concentration of dissolved solids, like the intense natural sugars in raw honey, or the dense sodium in concentrated bouillon, that solution literally pulls the water out of any invading microbial cells through their semi-permeable membranes. This process causes a fatal cellular collapse known as plasmolysis, completely destroying the bacteria on contact. The third fundamental rule is acidity, because an environment with a pH level under 4.6 permanently disables the vital enzymes that bacteria need to survive. This is exactly why your distilled white vinegar and powdered lemon juice remain incredibly safe. Finally, the fourth principle relies on alcohol concentration. Any solution crossing the 40% alcohol by volume threshold becomes a permanently sterile environment that simply cannot host biological contaminants. While these specific items possess the internal chemistry to last forever, their actual sensory quality and nutritional value will still face four relentless external enemies in your home, which are heat, light, oxygen, and moisture. If you leave your freeze-dried coffee, your non-fat dry milk, or your life-saving electrolyte powders in their flimsy original retail packaging, oxygen and humidity will slowly seep through the thin plastic. This exposure will eventually oxidize the delicate fats and clump your expensive powders into useless, rock-hard bricks. You must take absolute control of these environmental variables by utilizing modern packaging technology. For all of your dry powders, you need to invest in multi-layer mylar bags paired with dedicated oxygen absorbers. You do not need expensive commercial equipment to do this. You simply place your powders inside a thick mylar bag, drop in a fresh oxygen absorber, and seal the top using a standard household clothing iron or a hair straightener. When you do this, you are creating a microscopic vacuum environment that completely halts physical degradation, ensuring those powders remain potent and perfectly soluble for decades. For your heavy liquid syrups like honey and molasses, you must rely on neutral glass containers with tight sealing lids, and they must be stored in a cool, dark environment away from any direct sunlight. Sunlight is a massive source of ultraviolet radiation that will quietly break down the delicate organic compounds and beneficial natural enzymes in your expensive honey over time. But none of these carefully preserved powders or heavy syrups mean anything without the foundational pillar of your entire emergency pantry, which is clean, safely stored water. Inorganic water essentially never expires, but the catastrophic failure of stored water always comes from either biological recontamination or chemical leaching from cheap, low-quality plastic containers. You absolutely cannot store your long-term water in standard thin plastic milk jugs or cheap retail water bottles, because those commercial plastics rapidly break down and leach dangerous, hormone-disrupting chemicals directly into your family's drinking supply. You must store your foundational water supply in high-density polyethylene plastic, clearly marked as HDPE number 2 or inside heavy glass carboys, to guarantee that this foundational water remains completely sterile for years on end. It must be treated properly, often utilizing precise trace amounts of calcium hypochlorite to maintain a permanently sterile environment. When you combine heavily purified water stored in HDPE number 2 plastic with a mylar sealed powder like an oral rehydration salt, you are no longer just hoping for the best during a disaster. You are executing a flawless, scientifically backed hydration strategy that will keep your family safe, healthy, and completely resilient regardless of what happens to the municipal water grid. Looking at your pantry shelves right now might feel slightly overwhelming, especially when you realize that the most critical category of household survival planning has been quietly ignored until now. The massive blind spot in almost every serious preparedness plan out there is not the long-term food, and it is not the purified water, it is the vital missing category that sits directly between them. Those are the highly specific functional drinks that deliver the necessary biological and psychological support that plain food and water alone simply cannot provide when a crisis hits. But you absolutely do not need to drain your bank account or panic buy out of fear to permanently fix this vulnerability. I want you to perform a very simple, calm pantry audit this weekend by standing in front of your shelves and asking yourself 3 highly specific questions. First, do you actually have 3 liters of clean water per person per day for a minimum of 30 days? Second, does your current stockpile contain enough pure electrolyte reserves to safely treat a sick family member who is actively losing fluids? And third, do you currently possess high-value liquid assets that you could use to safely barter when traditional commerce inevitably stops? If the honest answer to any of those questions is no, then you now have a clear, highly actionable path forward. The reality is that you can completely secure meaningful quantities of all 10 of these vital survival drinks for under $150 total. The smartest financial strategy you can adopt today is to use standard dollar cost averaging. Simply supplementing your weekly grocery run with 10 to 15% of these functional dry and concentrated items. Pick up 1 jar of raw honey, 1 box of dried chamomile tea, or 1 sealed bag of electrolyte powder during your normal shopping trip. Start preparing right now this week, one single item at a time, long before the fragile supply chain issues its next major disruption signal. By taking these small, deliberate, pragmatic steps today, you are actively transforming passive anxiety into absolute household security, ensuring that your family not only survives the initial shock of an emergency, but remains strong, focused, and healthy in the long aftermath.